All right, Chris, we're back at it together again. I didn't tell you just now, by the way, this is episode 20. I'm actually really proud of us. 20 weeks of doing this. And some great feedback actually from some people that have been watching. I want to catch everybody up in the audience. I will be in DC for some events surrounding the White House Correspondents' Dinner next weekend. So we will record on Wednesday, and then I might even do some recording from the event or something and see if we can tie it in. And I will be again in DC in mid-May for some legislative stuff, and really focused on getting the staffs of some politicians to start playing so we can get the inside dirt on their bosses. That's where we're gonna go. This is Bully Pulpit, and I'm Justin Schoenfelder, founder and CEO of Fantasy Elect, and I'm with Chris.
And I'm Chris Matola, political consultant.
Chris,
for 40 years, and
yes.
Oh my God.
Do you have I've never asked you this, I don't think. Do you have a favorite campaign that you worked on?
Yeah, I probably do. George Pataki, who was the 3-term governor of New York, but his 2002 campaign, and it was right after 9/11, and he was a great governor. He was the kind of guy that doesn't exist anymore. He was very low-keyed, consensus, literally brought people together, and was normal. I mean, and a lot of candidates aren't normal, or they don't become normal, or they kind of go off the rails or something. But it was also the best run campaign I've ever been on. You hate to say a campaign was perfect, but it was pretty close to perfect. And so, you're working with a great job. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, when you like compare a campaign and you grade it on like perfection level, are you talking about disciplined? Are you talking about has a vision? Are you talking about kind of all of that? What makes for a good campaign for you?
A good campaign has, first off, is the candidate is good and you have enthusiasm for the candidate. He's not a paycheck. I mean, there's a famous phrase that my friend Mike Murphy likes to say: "Never fall in love with the meat." But you do sometimes. And but he was an extraordinarily good guy who'd done a very good job. The campaign was well funded, but top to bottom, everybody that worked on the campaign was extraordinary. And even like the minor functionaries have gone on to have really big careers and good careers in politics. So even the intern running around has their own consulting firm now. It was just kind of like everybody was super smart and super dedicated. And it was also a campaign because the job he did had tremendous amount of resources. If we wanted to shoot in Yankee Stadium with Joe Torre, we shot in Yankee Stadium with Joe Torre. If you said, I want a preschool in Harlem with 20 kids, and I got 2 preschools in Harlem with 60 kids. I mean, it was like that kind of resource, and it was a lot of fun. But again, that's probably my favorite campaign.
Well, I remember Pataki, and I'm curious, why didn't he go anything after governor? Did he not have aspirations for federal office?
Yeah, he ran for president. And never kind of got off the launching pad because it was 4 years.
Would he run in 2008?
Yeah, and he left office in 2006, and he didn't run in 2008. He ran in 2012.
Oh.
So it was too big of a gap.
Oh.
It was too big of a gap.
Yeah, he should have run in 2008.
But he was a 3-term, scandal-free governor of New York. I mean, every administration has scandals, but in terms of like being him. But since him, you've had Eliot Spitzer, who had to resign. You had Andrew Cuomo, who had to resign. And now you've got Kathy Hochul, who almost lost and is kind of a disaster. So, I mean, he's been so it's a harder job than people think. And
Well, even
yeah,
even the black blind governor after
Pat-
Elliot Spitzer, when people were like, "Oh, please, just give us somebody without this like burden
yeah,
of this like albatross around their neck," he had some sort of like sexual
yeah,
misconduct shit.
and you know, and it's forgotten now.
What was it? I don't even remember what his name was. You remember that? Do you remember
Patterson,
that guy?
Patterson or Pattison,
Yeah,
Patterson. But people forget
yeah.
is that for almost the entire Pataki administration, he was in a death war with Rudy Giuliani. Because in 1994, when Pataki first ran, Giuliani endorsed Mario Cuomo. And because Cuomo and him did a kind of a quid pro quo about getting funding for New York if you endorse me, and it became public and it blew up in his face, and Pataki won. So, you know, but again, it was a really interesting time to be alive. And, you know, and going through 9/11, and, you know, with that, it was incredible. You know, for when we would walk down the street or do something, you know, Pataki quietly went to, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands, of funerals of both people that died in the towers and first responders. And we did some survey work, and if you lived in the Manhattan media market, you had an 80% chance of knowing somebody personally, like first person that died there. If you lived in Schenectady, that only dropped to like 62% or something. And among those that, I'm sorry, it dropped to like 50%. But among those, like, I know a guy that knows a guy kind of thing. Even in you know, the far, even like in like a place like Watertown, New York, that would jump up into the high 80s. And so, you know, so 9/11 just wasn't a few thousand people. It was literally everybody you knew.
Yeah.
It was somebody you knew.
Right.
And that kind of hung over the whole campaign. And so how do you run a campaign with 9/11 being there? And we only mentioned 9/11 once. And, you know, and it was part of the, I will call the elegance and the restraint of the campaign, because it was a very raw, it was a very raw wound. And the last thing we wanted to do was exploit it, because, you know, we were still rebuilding and still trying to get stuff done. At the same time, it was there. And so we only mentioned it once. And we ran a spot for one day or a day and a half right before 9/11, which I want to say fell on a Sunday. And we ran it like Friday, Saturday. And we took our advertising. Everybody took all their political advertising off on 9/11. But basically, it was just Pataki and a student talking to camera and just thanking the people of New York for pulling together on after 9/11. And that was our 9/11 spot. You know, so we talked about it without really talking about it. But it was amazing, because you could not walk down the street in Manhattan without, you know, 3-4 people come up and just shake his hand and said, I was a neighbor of so-and-so, and I was at the funeral, and I saw you there in the back. But again, he was a guy that didn't like to take credit and never liked the limelight, you know. And he'd rather watch basketball and football than anything, too, which is also endearing. You know, can we wait until the fourth? Like, I know we have to do this shot, but can we wait until the fourth quarter's over? And it's like, of course, you know. That's somebody normal.
Yeah, that is endearing.
Right?
Yeah, right. Just a normal
As opposed
guy.
to, let me get this thing. I got to get on.
Well, let's take a massive U-turn then and talk about New York through the lens of Trump's trial.
Yeah.
The conventional wisdom has been that Trump has only benefited from his legal troubles, right? But I actually said to somebody this past weekend, I think that the calculus is wrong once you get into the trial. And long story short, there was a Texas Venture Alliance gala this weekend. There was a panel that I was commenting with, and I kind of think that I think watching the way this trial's been going and the way that some people are struggling for a narrative around it to defend Trump, I think we're approaching a contested Republican convention. What do you think?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Well, let me ask you a question. Okay, not right now. If he's convicted,
No.
is there a contested convention?
No.
No, really? Interesting.
I just think he's too baked in. And, his only way out of this is to become president, is to be the nominee. I don't think that not being the nominee helps him in a legal sense or in a standing sense. And I think he needs to have both.
Right.
And I think that's a problem. I mean, and again, the trial is a double-edged sword for him in a lot of ways. You see, especially among minority voters, among African American voters and some Hispanic voters, they're not quite at the witch hunt yet, but they're kind of going there. And I do think the case, to me, I understand it's different, but it also smacks of the John Edwards thing, who also, it was different. It was using campaign money to pay his girlfriend. And this is kind of using it to pay off. Yeah, but can I, and maybe I am missing a nuanced point here, but here's my point that I need somebody to explain to me about this whole thing. So, Stormy Daniels, adult film star, sex worker, got paid hush money so not to report her affair with Trump, which was negotiated over a long period of time, and then they paid it when it became, she was like, hey, pay me or else I'm going to come out during the campaign. Why did she sleep with him in the first place? Was she this is a woman who has sex with like great looking people for a living. And was she so turned on, and did she see, Donald Trump, all 260 of him, 240 of him, and said, man, I got to get myself a piece of that? A 70, a guy.
Wasn't he listed at 180, a very svelte 180 bodybuilder weight?
Yeah, but she was in the room with him. And so if the $200,000 wasn't a payment for sex like you would a prostitute, I want to hear her story about how she was so overcome with passion that she couldn't wait to have sex with Donald Trump. So either that's what happened.
Have you seen the documentary? Have you seen the documentary Stormy?
No, I've seen her interviews, but again, that's the question. That's the question I want answered. It was like, what was the mechanism that compelled her to sleep with Trump? And because if she did it for the money, and that's what the money is, and they're just calling it hush money, or that was we're going to pay you and you be quiet about this. You're getting paid for sex and to be quiet about it. I mean, I think it was the old Charlie Sheen joke who said, what do you pay a hooker for? You pay her to leave. And so if it's that, it becomes a different case. And I get why you wouldn't want people to know that you paid a hooker. But I need that explained to me. Either she was overcome in a moment of passion to have sex with Donald Trump, or she did it for the money.
Well, from what I heard her saying in interviews, like, it's interesting. People tend to frame things as they're always a victim of circumstance, right? But, he had talked about her being on The Apprentice. They were having conversation, and suddenly, he goes in the bathroom. He comes out, he's naked. I don't buy that version of the story necessarily. What I would believe more is in every less accurate version of a story is a little bit of truth, and I believe that maybe she did think that by sleeping with him she would get on The Apprentice. Maybe that's where it was going, right? That was the transaction. There was a transaction there for sure. But my opinion is that most of sexual relationships are some kind of transaction anyway, right? Whether it's a transaction of love, or that's what a relationship is. But she said, that he kept talking about how much she reminded him of Ivanka or whatever. Anyway, I don't know if we can have time to go into that Freudian black hole.
But I'm trying to find the right frame here.
But I think she slept with him years before, right? Like it was in, because it was when Melania was pregnant with Barron, or like that was the thing that made it seem even more like skeezy, I guess, for people, was like Melania was is what?
It's definitely so skeezy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, but
yeah. And then years later.
Yeah, but I mean, she didn't get paid. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time Trump stiffed the creditor, so to speak, right? And
exactly. So I think that's the point. Is like she came back and she was like, "Well, I'm gonna sell this story," and because I didn't get to be on The Apprentice like I thought I would, and that's when the deal was made to like shut her up and just give her some money to go away.
And again, I mean, good luck prosecute. I mean, if you're going to prosecute prostitution in Manhattan, good fucking luck. And again, I think this kind of goes. I mean, I think this goes to the everybody can agree that it's horrible and skeevy and stuff. But again, it goes to the John Edwards thing, is that, which I think the Supreme Court kicked out. They and I think it's going to fall into the same kind of thing.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, from what I've heard about the case, again, I'm not a lawyer. I just pretend to be one. But I think it is my understanding is that the statute of limitations was up on certain things. Then they tried to shoehorn basically a federal law at a city level, and all of these different things. It is by far the weakest case against Trump, right? I don't, and even Alvin Bragg didn't want to bring the case initially. There's all this like drama around it. And then you take the Atlanta case against Trump, and you have a DA that can't keep it in her pants and ruins that case and puts everything in doubt. It's like nobody has a clear idea of what responsibility is, apparently.
Yeah.
I would have had more respect for her in Atlanta if she had gone and gotten a prostitute rather than jeopardizing the case.
Yeah. I mean,
and then
it goes to, you said, like the lack of, like, you kind of look at this and like, these are supposed to be the adults. I mean, there was a, there was a famous, Norm Macdonald thing when he was doing the news. And they come back to him and he says, this may sound harsh, but I think everybody involved with this story should be shot. And he went to the next thing, and it's like,
okay, I get it.
But again,
I just think for the first time, Trump being the first president to stand trial, or the first former president to stand trial, I think now that it's real, I actually do think that it's raising doubts and it's raising issues in people. From what even just in conversations with people, it isn't something that people are comfortable with, which I think is good. I don't think anybody should be comfortable with, like, who was the guy, Marion Barry, the old mayor of DC that was like convicted of like crack and prostitution and then became mayor again. Like, I feel like we should have higher standards, but by the way, okay. I'm wrong then, or maybe I'm wrong.
That was in the 80s, and I was living in DC briefly in the 80s, in the mid 80s, 84, 85. And street corner vendors used to sell T-shirts with Marion Barry on it, and it said, I saw the tape, the bitch set him up. and I always was tempted to buy one, but I figured, oh my God, this is, I don't want to, why am I, but I should have kept it as a curio of a crazy thing. But yeah, it's.
What's even funnier is you could wear that shirt now, and it could relate to Trump.
Right.
I heard the Access Hollywood tape, and that bitch set him up.
It set him up, right? And speaking of like stupid lack of adult stuff, by the way, as we're talking, I just got a tweet from Trump fundraising. From Trump, I stormed out of the court.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm finished, but I'll never surrender. Send money. Or whatever it says. I'm
going to start sending those tweets and see how successful that is.
Right. But the Senate now, they've got to swear in senators today or this week for the Mayorkas impeachment trial. The Secretary of Homeland Security, and it's like, I mean, really? I mean, forgetting for a moment, he's another California imbecile. But if we're going to start impeaching people for being stupid, then we're just, let's impeach everybody. Yeah. There's going to be like 4 people left in government.
Right.
But it's just like, what a friggin' waste of time.
Well, I read that Schumer's going to move to dismiss the charges.
Yeah, and they
I read
should.
something to say.
Again, it's one of the arguments about Trump's first impeachment trial, which I was inclined to, was that basically he was impeached over the phone call at the Ukraine. And unless something is a clear-cut crime, like unambiguous, that, impeachment is a serious last resort. This is really serious shit. And the fact that people were interpreting a phone call one way or another, and, and it's like a lot of, Iran-Contra. I mean, it's like, people, ultimately, forget where it went, but when it started is that, people violated the Boland Amendment. And should you be criminalizing differences in policy or being incompetent in this case? Mayorkas is a total dope, and he comes off as a total dope, and his border policies, if Biden loses, it's because of his border policies. I mean, personally, I would want to keep him in there. No, stay in there. Like the guy that's doing a terrible job, was the Napoleon thing. Never interfere with an enemy when he's in the process of destroying himself. Like, you don't want him out. God forbid, if you're a Republican, God forbid Biden puts in, somebody that knows what they're doing and they get the border under control. Then, fuck you now, right?
Right.
But it's just so dumb. I mean, it's just so dumb. And it doesn't help anybody or anything.
I don't think the border issues are being solved right now at all. But it seems to me that impeaching Mayorkas is not where your issue lies. No. It lies with a policy difference with the president. Right. I mean, he's carrying out the policy that the president is setting, right? Like,
and if your argument there is no policy, or there's a stupid policy, well, that's the president. I mean, yeah. And again, but again, it's, you see Mayorkas and you're kind of like, he comes off as such a obsequious tool, but you can't impeach people for that either, or else you wouldn't have anybody in politics.
Right. But to your point though about don't stop your enemy when he's in the process of hurting himself. The Republicans themselves as a caucus can't even stop from hurting themselves, because what they could be using Mayorkas and so many of these issues to really badger the administration. Mm-hmm. But instead, Marjorie Taylor Greene and now Thomas Massie and maybe some others are creating a new round of infighting so that they seem even more divided than it seems like a bigger issue than Mayorkas, right? It's overshadowing, it's stealing the oxygen out of the room, because are they going to be able to pass any bills? And if they do, if compromises are made, if bills are passed, is Johnson going to pay a political price for that by losing his speakership? Or what's he going to have to give for the Democrats to save him? It seems that the disorganization is a bigger issue when they could have had a win that they could have played off for the next couple of months.
They could have played off that. And, and they had, and they're dicking around with Israel funding, is that when you look at a national survey and, people are still overwhelmingly in favor of Israel. They've got problems with Gaza, they got problems, but Israel is a stone dead winner. You had a sect, I think sect is the right word, within the Democratic caucus that tried to defund the U.S. piece of funding for the Iron Dome, which saved Israel this week from the 300 missiles and drones and whatever that was attacking them. And and it was basically the squad AOC and the usual suspects. And it's like, the idea you wouldn't take that and hold their feet to the fire. I'm going to open up that hearing again. Instead, they kind of do this Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of nitwit show. There was to make fun of him. It is the congressional equivalent of the guy that set himself on fire in front of the fucking embassy to make a point.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, the Air Force guy, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna pour gasoline on myself and light myself on fire. I can't even remember the guy's name. Yeah, nobody will, but
I know, so
right?
sad.
You said it, but it's the equivalent of setting yourself on fire, and so you've got Republicans when they hand you a border crisis, when they hand you funding for the Iron Dome, when they hand you these fucking stone dead winner things, and you don't think, because you can't even see, you're not organized enough to even take advantage of them. And, and part of that goes to the quality of the candidate. Part of that goes to the quality of the staff. I think part of that goes to what, the media wants to fund. And I think a lot of these people really hate being in Congress, but they like being a celebrity. They hate doing the job.
What I'm very curious about, I want your feedback on, what I have had a hard time wrapping my brain around now is that, so the Republicans, I don't think we have two parties, I guess, by definition, but they're really coalition parties. You have multiple factions within each party, right? So let's say one of the factions, that the factions have been splitting in the Republican Party and the Democrats, but we're talking about the Republicans. And there was a MAGA faction, right? It's almost kind of ridiculous to call it a MAGA faction. It seems very childish to use such a word, but let's call it a MAGA faction. Yeah. It seems that faction is now splintering because both Johnson and Marjorie Taylor Greene are in that faction.
Yeah.
And there seems to be now a split to an even more microcosmic level between those who say, yes, we're in the MAGA faction, but we need to pass some legislation, and those who just say, no, we need to burn everything down. That's kind of how I see it splitting, is that any compromise means that you are a stone cold traitor. You didn't get every single thing you wanted. You didn't keep them from getting anything from everything they want, or anything. So it's like, is that right? Because Marjorie Taylor Greene has been an ally of Trump, and Johnson just met with Trump last Friday. They talked about election integrity. So they seem to be allies. What is going on? Why is she isn't Trump, shouldn't Trump step in here?
I think Johnson is a little different story because he comes out of a legislative background, but he's kind of stuck placating because he's got what a four vote majority, and or what a 5 vote majority. Not to mention that stupid rule that they can kind of call for a new speaker election every time, and so he's got to do. He's got to keep feeding the animals in the zoo. It's like feeding time at the zoo. He's got to throw them something, but you can't govern like that, and I think that's the problem he has. And I think he'd be more than happy to see all this shit go away. But I think he's a little different from that because he's between the rock and the hard place on stuff, and there've always been congressional bomb throwers, but they didn't empower them. I mean, they were gadflies. I mean, Bernie Sanders in the Senate and the House, he was a gadfly. He was a congressional bomb thrower. I mean, he's more serious, obviously, than or semi-serious than they are. But it was the same kind of thing, and those people serve a function. But you don't want those people to run the fucking country.
Exactly.
By the way, you're talking about coalitions, and last week was a really interesting week, and I had a kind of a heated discussion with I will call it my controversial point of view, is that Kari Lake, running for U.S. Senate in Arizona, and she came out with an abortion statement that was basically a giant flip-flop from where she had been, and
yes, it was.
And my point was, I said, welcome to democracy, and that's politics. And I think what the U.S. Supreme Court did, the rest of the world had this debate about abortion, and it was ugly. You could go back a couple of years ago in Ireland, and it was ugly, and it was heated, and then it was voted on and settled, and everybody went, okay, and went on. And I think the United States uniquely has had these kind of abortion wars since Roe because it was settled by the court, as opposed to the legislatures. And I see what you're seeing now is that, Arizona has this crazy, 1848 law about abortion. And if you're even a fucking normal voter, remotely normal, you go, what are you people, insane? And so the politicians react to, go back to, I always say VOK, voters are rational and ask for rational things. And the politicians hear that and they go, yeah, that's not rational. I'm going to change my mind. Now, interestingly enough, is the voters won't hold that against you as long as you're changing it to what they want. Right. And so what she did was actually very savvy because she can say, yeah, I agree with you. You're right. She's got other problems, but on abortion, I think she's the canary in the coal mine because you're going to see all these candidates going, shit, I can't get elected if I'm, going to support an 1848 fucking law on abortion. And so I think what you're going to see is the pro-life piece of the Republican coalition, which has been there, forever in my lifetime. You're going to see that blow apart. And as both parties are becoming very different, and they're going to become very different and will continue to. But I think this abortion issue is going to, it's going to get ugly and nasty. But like Kentucky and Kansas both passed arguably pro-choice laws. They didn't go as far as some would have liked, but they also didn't go back as far. And so you're going to have this rough consensus. And ultimately, we're going to wind up like Europe with somewhere between 14 and 20 some weeks, 24 weeks, or 14 and 20 weeks, like the most of Europe.
But I think. So let me ask you a question. I saw Kari Lake flip-flopped. Mm-hmm. I also saw that right around the exact time that she flip-flopped, the Republican-controlled legislature in Arizona blocked the Democrats from putting a bill forward that would have reversed that Supreme Court ruling, and removed that 1848 law. So at least the state representatives did not see a political reason to change their position, even though the people of Arizona, right? So So if I play that out, I
Mhm.
mean, I would argue that even in red states, even here in Texas, even in maybe in Alabama, I mean, especially with the IVF ruling, I would say even in the reddest states, there is a majority that believes there should be access to abortions.
Yeah, and yeah,
Forgetting a week count, but there should be access to a certain period of time to have an abortion,
yes.
right? Um, but I don't think anything shy of voters directly voting for it, of the reddest states, I don't think are willing to cave on that issue
Oh,
right now. And I think that, so to your point, maybe what you're saying is it's going to be a prolonged battle for a period
I
of
think it's
time
a short.
before that shakes out, maybe is your
I think
point.
I think it's 4 6 years. It's over. It's just like, I mean, we had a decade worth of battles about the border. That shit's over. I mean,
Mm.
there is now consensus. Basically, Democrats folded their hand, 20-year hand on the border. And you're going to see Republicans
Right.
fold like a empty suit on abortion. I
Mm.
mean, defund the police was hot for about one cycle. And that one, like, no.
Mm-hmm.
And again, and where people go defund the police, especially in poor and minority communities, they're like, what are you people fucking nuts? Defund the police, right?
Right.
And so,
Right.
there's going to be a huge political body count on it. And I think that's a good thing, and I think that's a healthy thing. Biden at one time was pro-life. When he first
Mm-hmm.
started out, because
Yeah.
he ran pre-Roe. He ran in 72. What was Roe?
Right.
70. So he ran pre-Roe, but
76, right?
he was
70. Yeah.
70. Gosh, 73. I think.
Yeah. And I also think
But so
73. Okay.
he flip
I
flopped,
also think that,
right? I mean, you kind of
I
have
so
to survive.
so to your point though, do you think that Roe wasn't the final word? Because ultimately anything can be
Yeah.
changed. Even laws can be changed, right? So I don't think that the anti-abortion people are going to suddenly accept that, oh, well, we got what we wanted, which was just for the states to decide. What they want is for there to be no abortions. Don't you think that that's just going to continue to happen?
No, because they may want it to happen. They may force the hand. But if you're losing abortion votes in Kentucky and fucking Kansas, where exactly are you going to win them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Arizona. To take your point, Arizona has two Democratic governor, or has a Democratic governor and two Democratic U.S. senators. Alabama has two Democratic
Mm-hmm.
U.S. senators.
Mm-hmm.
Just to pick those kind of hot states to begin with, and so voters are going to go the other way, and just like the no restriction on abortion people, the no abortion people reasonably go, no,
Right.
you're fucking nuts. We want
Exactly.
we want reasonable access and reasonable responsibility. What that is
Mm-hmm.
is that's why you have politics and debate. And again, I think you're going to get 14, 7, 10, 14. There's going to be a number, and each state's going to differ a little
Right.
bit, but it's all going to get massaged out. And again, I think it's.
Yeah. Let's finalize it with a couple of over unders. Over under the Mayorkas dismissal, less than 75 votes to dismiss the charges. 75.5. Under. Wow. Okay. See. So you think like 30 Republican senators are going to vote to not dismiss it? Right. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. I wanted to point out Idaho Democrats are running in all of the state legislative races for the first time in 30 years. What's the over under on the number of seats that they will fill in Idaho state legislature? You on the question, but I wanted to point out that the final question I have for you, Pennsylvania running right now. Over under Joe Biden in the Democratic primary, 89.8% of the vote. Okay, good. And you know what? I agree. Doing steel tariffs, is that a moot in Pennsylvania? Yeah, there you go. I think Pennsylvania might choose the next president anyway, right? All right. That's let's jump off. That's another episode in the can. Chris, I'll see you next week.